introduce our final presenter, Kevin Laskey, who is a composer, drummer, and writer based in New York City. His music lives in a netherworld between styles. Current projects include an opera about NFL referees and an album of indie rock Sondheim covers with Santino Fontana. He's contributed writings on music to NPR and music and literature, and is the former editor of the blog Jazz Speaks. He has a PhD in music composition from the University of Pennsylvania, and he has taught at West University and Ursinus College, and has been teaching music theory at NYU Steinhardt since 2021. Please join me in welcoming Kevin.
Thank you, Cliff, and thank you all for sticking around and sitting down for one more presentation. Again, I feel I've been overwhelmed in the best way by all of the wonderful, wonderful presentations and information and just all these different kinds of music that we've gotten to learn about this weekend. And so I think for this last one, the what that we'll be sharing is I think a little less important than say the how. And I think this can be a little bit more a space for us to think about, okay, we've had all this information, and kind of what do we do with it? What do we do with all these musics that we might not be familiar with? How can we get to know them? How can we feel comfortable, again, sharing that with our students, some of the stuff that, again, Adam was talking about yesterday. So in some ways, that's going to be maybe a little bit more foregrounded than like, hey, we're going to get a really deep dive into, again, this Pacific Colombian music that we're going to talk about. So there is somewhat here. So this is, we're going to be talking about, thinking about dance, thinking about drama a little bit. But a lot of this, I think, has much more to do with how do we make sense of a new experience? How do we process this? Whether that's the new music we've been hearing all weekend. But so before I actually get into talking about stuff, I want to hear from you guys. What are some ways when you encounter something new, whether that's music, whether that's, in some ways I want you to think beyond music, what are some ways that you process or make sense of something that is novel in some way? What are some of your strategies? Yeah.
Relate it to something you have experienced before.
All right, so again, relating to previous experience, and maybe with a similar experience. All right, so like something, like is always very helpful. What else? What are some other things that you find yourself doing if you're engaging with something totally new?
Like repetition, kind of like
all right.
More exposures.
Repetition. So how do you like maybe motivate yourself to do something again? Because like let's say you hear something new and you're like, I'm not so into that. But again, repetition can be so important. How do you sort of motivate yourself to do the repetition? Is there yeah?
I don't know. Depending on what it is, I might imagine myself trying to teach about it.
Okay. So
I imagine the embarrassment of not knowing it.
all right. So again, don't want to be cringe. So okay, I have to do it. I'm not like it, but again, if I like be cringe to kind of write this off or try to explain it in my weird way. So yeah, like wanting to get past that embarrassment. Okay. What's another way that like, I don't really like this thing, but I should do it again? Like, are there any ways that you
force a friend to do it with you?
Okay. Yeah. Like, do it in a group. Any other just yeah.
Related to practice.
All right.
I often don't like practicing, but I have to.
Okay. So it's a little bit of like again, use again motivational strategies for other things that you've used in the past. Like how do you get yourself to? Again, how do we get ourselves to do anything? Use motivational strategies from other fields or other experiences. All right. So we've got repetition. We've got relating this notion of like. This is like. Any other strategies of like how you process or make sense of something?
I usually remind myself that like that angst or concern I feel because we can't predict part of it is okay.
Okay.
Like, try to become curious about it instead of feeding into that panicky feeling.
All right. I love this idea of again thinking about the emotion of like, okay, there's this panic and I don't know, but trying to transform uncertainty into a positive. Yeah, I really like that. How like this thing, oh, I don't know what this is, and almost training ourselves to want to seek that out. Like for me, I think about the first time I had a really hoppy beer when I was in college. I thought it was the most disgusting thing ever, and now I'm like a huge hophead. And I think about, okay, so how did I get into that? Or like, how do you get into everything? Like again, my own taste in music in terms of the stuff that really inspired me to write is like pretty out classical music and avant-garde jazz, and like how did I enjoy that thing that so many people don't like? And group pressure is a big thing. There are people who I think are cool and nice who are into this thing, and so I want to be with them. But in some ways, I'm thinking about just our own psychology, like our own, like how are we as learners? How are we as, again, as people in a world where there is just so much to experience, and that newness can be, again, that uncertainty can create a feeling of panic, and how do we turn that into a positive? So again, we have, I think, this emotional thing, like how do we center ourselves when we're dealing with new materials? But there are also like just common intellectual practices that we can do. Again, this idea of the field of philosophy knows phenomenology. Like how do you make sense of experience, especially when you don't know what a thing is? And like and metaphor and analogy are big things. And all my students can attest to the fact that I'll use like food analogies in music like all the time. And I feel like once we think about it, oh yeah, we have so many different ways that we're trying to, again, express maybe even the concepts in music theory that, you know, very well. We think about all these different analogies for people to grasp onto. So with that in mind, let's have what might potentially be a new musical experience. So, who knows if you know what this thing is. But we're listening to this music. It's a little bit like what Lena was doing. I want to figure out, how do you count this? And let's listen. I'll do it a couple of times. But also, as you're figuring it out, I want you, if possible, to be of two minds. So maybe the first time you're trying to figure out, and then you'll listen to it again, and you'll think about what you did or what you are doing to figure it out. All right. So listen again, and if you want to take some more time trying to count this out, think about how to count it, but also like evaluate your own strategies. How are you, again, what faculties are you using? What analogies, what metaphor, what do you do? How are you making sense of this? times. We've done some things to try to figure out what it is, and we thought about how to do it. So before I talk a little bit more about what this is and how the practitioners themselves think about it, what were some of your strategies? What did you do as you were listening to this to try to make sense of what was going on? So I'm less concerned about what you found and more of the how you found it. We'll get to the one, yeah.
Simplifying the problem, the fact that the melody was sort of distracting me from trying to find regularity, so I chose folkloric.
All right. So try to ignore, again, ignoring things that feel extraneous or ignoring, or I mean not extraneous, but like there's something about trying to find, again, processing information streams. And again, and how do you do that? What do you do now? What do you pertain to? So, all right, that's great. What are some of the other things you guys did?
Maybe related, kind of like latching on to the more percussive elements that were more like cyclic, like things that were continuing and repeating.
All right, so cluing in on repetitive elements, things that seem to have more easily to entrain to from a repetitive standpoint, as opposed to melody, which is like, again, pretty jagged from a contour standpoint. Instead, okay, we've got these kind of stomping sounds, wherever they might be. We don't quite know yet because this is an acousmatic experience for the moment. Yeah, what else? What's some of the other things that you, yeah?
Once the same strategy, ignore the melody, focus on the repeated stomping pattern. Then I started thinking about the relative size of the irregularly shaped beats and tried to come up with a ratio to describe them.
All right, so once you kind of found your key bit of your way into this, then you start to think analytically. It's like, okay, there's this sense that now that I'm focusing on the stomps, and that's a single stream of information that I can process in real time, now I can start to bring my analytical faculties and think, and proportion seems to be important.
Like subdivide.
Or, yeah, so yeah, the proportion of these and how to subdivide those bits. Yeah.
I found myself comparing to it like a known model.
Okay.
So I thought I heard something that sounded close to a tresillo.
Okay.
So I put 4/4 into my mind because that's how I've seen it notated in the past.
Okay.
And then I was trying to figure out how closely it fit that model. So there was a little bit of a rush on the last beat. So what was similar, what was different?
Kind of almost, yeah, I love the idea of like, okay, what is this like? It's not quite that thing, but again, the tresillo is something we've experienced a lot. We've seen it notated. We have a sense of how it, again, feels in time, and we can, again, have a clear comparison. It's like, yeah, I don't know how to draw something, but yeah, something where it's like, and now I try to find what's unlike about it. All right, any other strategies? Yeah.
So I tried to put it in my body as soon as I could. And then, like, it's sort of tresillo, it changes every time. Sometimes that second hit is a little shorter, but I found as soon as I could actually get it in my body that I could kind of follow the microtiming as it was going through.
All right.
So yeah, when I tried to think about it before getting it in my body, my brain was like, what? We don't want to parse that shit. And then I got it in my body and then my brain was like, hell yeah, we got this.
All right, putting in the body, and this is again something that we're going to talk about a lot with this idea of what Maeve Sturbens has called embodied navigation. And this idea of, I don't know what this thing is, but I can move to it in some way, and I can think about my own movement. So I can't analyze the sound, but I can analyze my reaction, or I can analyze my, again, emulation of it. So if I don't know that thing, but I know myself, at least we hope we know ourselves to a degree, or we know our bodies. And so we use that as a way of moving through a new experience. So, how many of you have heard of Telespringar music from the Telemark region of Norway? It's got a bit more common because I think also rhythmically it does push against a lot of some of the ways that theorists have talked about, how, especially from a cognition standpoint, how do we process rhythm? So this is in 3. How many people thought this was in 3? Maybe? Especially hearing tresillos written in 4. It's like, oh, he was in 4. Or remember the first time I heard something like this? It's like in 7, 8, maybe. It's like 3 + 2 + 2. So they're not isochronous beats, but there's no isochronous subdivision. So it's just this kind of, it's a long, a medium, and a short beat. And so it's, again, generally fairly regular. And again, there's some degrees of microtiming, and certain players will have, and different regions of Norway that have different kinds of springar Some are faster and flatter, a little more even, but here in the telemark region, it's pretty exaggerated in terms of this long, medium, and short. And again, what you heard instrument-wise is a hard-amber fiddle. Here's one that's uptown at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But this idea that, hey, we're entraining, we can seemingly entrain to something where there's no isochronous division even. But, so, okay, this is something that is interesting and different. But here's now the video where this comes from. And so I think for me, one thing that was really important when I first got exposed to this was the movement is what helped it make sense. And watching the movement and then emulating that movement. And this is where I think this notion of emulation I'm going to use a lot rather than pure imitation. Because again, a lot of these, especially with folkloric traditions, it's like weird, like I've learned from people who are very good telestring or fiddle players, but again, even my teachers kind of came from it, originally from outside of the tradition and so on. So this idea of, again, it's not like we're going out and performing this. This is something for our own exploration in the classroom, in a safe space, and in a place where we feel like, how do we relate this, knowing that we come into any music with a bunch of baggage and prior knowledge, like Tressio. So let's take a watch here, and let's see how this dance goes, and how it outlines, and I think how it helps me, at least, helps me make sense of this kind of non-isochronous beat, but also no isochronous subdivision either. This sort of step, fall, lift pattern. So that second medium beat is where we seem to have that weight accent. And then we have that nice lift on that short beat. And so this idea of kind of rhythmic tension or rhythmic energy that is really related to, okay, the energy is required to lift, and the idea of, okay, we now have this potential energy that now gets released when we come back to the ground. So there's this literal sense of gravity in the dance that I think helps me understand the musical gravity of this timing. So I encourage you to do a little bit of emulation, a little bit of lifting on that rock. And we'll do a little bit more active stuff in the next bit, just to kind of get the idea. So this sense of, okay, why dance this out? Why put it in our body? And I think this is something that can be really helpful for students when, again, dealing with new experiences. Okay, you're analyzing your own interaction. You're analyzing your body and the sound. And so I think in this case, it helps make sense of the non-isochronicity. It can make this new experience a little more processable because you're looking through the lens of your embodied experience. We start to think more about associating sound with motion, which again, very much grounded in the really interesting research about how much the motor movement parts of our brain are firing when we're listening to sound, and how tightly those things are intertwined. That, again, sound, even without image, sound without movement, is still movement. And this idea of physical modeling of tension and resolution. So a different way of, again, processing this idea of, okay, how can we teach someone a very traditional theory concept of tension resolution, and this idea of physical modeling, in this case, modeling of tension resolution in rhythm, where you have, okay, we're increasing energy, we got to use energy to lift our bodies off the ground, to push against that kind of gravity that gives us potential energy that then gets released. All right, so here's the sort of thesis of, okay, what are we doing? Why could this be helpful? Now, a bit of an application. Now moving it onto within maybe a more, a different tradition and a lot of non-isochronous rhythm is Bulgarian folk music. And so we're going to try some stuff here. So I do encourage you to stand and dance or emulate in a way that feels comfortable to you. Again, that's another thing too, where there are many ways to emulate this motion. It doesn't necessarily need to be an imitation. It can be a translation into your own body, particularly, again, all of our bodies are different. Our students' bodies are different, and having a way for many people to engage with that physically. So I'm going to have notation of these different rhythms. We're going to have video. We're going to observe the dance, particularly trying to pay attention to lifts and falls and how that aligns with the rhythm. Emulate movement, and then whether that emulation that we do are kind of dancing, or analysis via dancing, analysis via our own movement, can help us perform the rhythm more comfortably. All right, so this first one, Padushko. And so again, we have these different ways of thinking about it. We have these groups of 2 and 3. So it's like, okay, we can notate it in a Western notation way, 5/8. 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3. I have Takadimi syllables. But then a lot of the musicians themselves think of it as these non-isochronous beats. Short long. I also like the short long because it also a lot of times corresponds to the dance. Step lift. Basically, in all of these videos, we're going to see anytime there's a longer beat, the longer beat is what accommodates the lift. So let's, again, using this process, let's watch, observe, see how the dance relates to this rhythm, and then we'll try emulating it, whether standing, seated, whatever you want to do, and then we'll see how that helps us with the performance. See if we want to do some emulation. Again, I'm in class, I am very much someone who, again, my students are tend to be very reticent, especially here at NYU, a lot of cool, urbane young people. And so I take it upon myself to be extremely earnest, bordering on cringe. So I will do my emulation, and hopefully that can inspire you to be more confident in your own emulation here. Again, here we go. So. Especially if you do it for a little while, you start to, again, as you entrench it, you can go, what is my experience? Like, hi, I'm dancing in 5. And you're like, almost like a joke. In that way, it's like, oh, come on. But then it's like, yeah, we're just dancing in 2. It's just that one beat tends to be longer, and that helps accommodate that lift. So let's see how this goes with now performing this rhythm, and it has dancing it. And again, our own relation to dance, like we might not be totally coordinated as we're figuring this out. And I kind of noticed that myself, where I'm like, oh, cool, I'm like, sometimes I'll feel like on the longs, I'm coming back down too soon, and I'm like trying to get back on. But now let's say we're getting into performing this. Let's see how this goes. I'll turn the volume down a bit, and let's try a few different ways of now taking this and trying to perform this rhythm. Let's first just do claps, and we'll clap on the short long. All right, hold on. Let me start going. Wider, hard to drain as we start going back to our. All right, I'll turn back up a little bit. Here you go. So let's try something else. I'm going to slow down the video a bit, which is always a nice, fun thing to do. Let's take it down a little bit. So allow us to do some syllables. So we have some takadimi syllables here. Tari, taki, da, tari, taki, da. So let's see how, if we slow this down a bit, see how this works. So maybe just do the syllables, just to get that density of the isochronous division. And then maybe try adding the claps on, and then taking the division away. And I'll let this keep going for a while so we can again explore that. I noticed myself hitting the second ta slightly higher pitch, where I get that sense of lift. So that one kind of height, that one kind of energy that I can translate as a contour too. So we're just translating one form of movement, one form of energy to another. We go ahead, padushko, and all the other patterns, and we might not do all of them. But again, we do have all these combinations of shorts and longs. There we go. And again, like what we saw earlier, Lena, instead of male and female drums, we have male and female rhythms. So this is called Ursinus, where we have two shorts and a long, starting with the shorts. If you flip it and it's long, short, short, that would be the male version. All right, let's see what happens now when we try that same learning process again. So same thing, observe, emulate, perform, and again, see how these different ways of engaging with the sound, engaging with it visually, engaging with it orally, engaging with it in terms of our bodies, engaging with it in terms of making our own sound, how all of these different sensorial reactions or experiences relate and help us process this potentially new tradition. Faster. a challenge. So, again, our handy dandy, let's take this down. Take it down to 3/4 speed. I'm going to start to emulate, and then I encourage you to emulate as well. Again, some of the things I pick up on too is at this faster tempo, I start to feel more of kind of a bit of a different hierarchy where the second short feels maybe a little less emphasized, or it can almost be like an extra kind of double long, da, 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 da. But still, it's still a fall, lift kind of sensation for me. All right, here we go. So we're moving it, we're starting to feel this in different ways, trying to relate to it. Again, there can be a more close emulation where we can see okay, it's clear leg lifts on the long lift notes. We can be emulating that specifically. We can be translating that to other parts of our body. Again, I'm making like, okay, how am I going to drum along with this? All right, so we have these different experiences. And so I'll at least touch on these other rhythms quickly. So we have Daikovo, which, again, you might know most commonly from the Brubeck Blue Rondo a la Turk. Again, as Adam can attest to, some of these rhythms are all over that part of the world. Again, a lot of my experience with this coming from the jazz world is through an Armenian pianist and composer named Tigran Hamasyan, who does very elaborate, elaborations on these ideas. So lots of similar kinds of things in this sort of greater Ottoman part of the world. All right, so here's Daikovo. This one's a little hard to follow dance-wise, but again, I think a later phrase, I think it's easier to pick up on. Sometimes these tempos do. Commonalities, this sense of, as opposed to, I think, counting this, really obsessing about that, short, 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 long, short, 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 long, in the same way, you learn to have, again, that certain swing feel if you are learning different traditions of song rhythms. Same thing here, you have this intuitive sense of what that long versus short sounds like. So as opposed to, I feel like when I was in band all through high school, it's like subdivide, subdivide, subdivide. And here it's like, don't subdivide. Feel that lift and feel that fall. And yet another way to conceive of this idea. We're not in 9, we are in 4. Just the last 4 tend to have to be a little bit longer. And then finally, so Kopanitsa in 11, so short, short, long, short, short. So let's see again, as we watch, you can do your light emulation, hand emulations. I always talk about like doing chair dancing. My students when we're sitting in seminar. So I don't know what chair dancing. So again, chair dancing, I also call it Muppet dancing because Muppets don't have legs. So it's always. All right. So now we're getting a little more familiar here. Think about, okay, what are some other practical applications? How else, other ways we can engage in an embodied way with these rhythms, dancing them, clapping them, syllabalizing them. Maybe try some singing. So here's a video. This is from the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. This is the Bulgarian radio women's choir. And so again, these were big in the 90s. So this album, I think, was at least gold, if not platinum. But we'll listen to a little bit of this first song they performed on Johnny Carson, and then there's a nice transcription of it that we can, again, engage with. So, again, this was broadcast to millions upon millions of homes in the United States in 1990. And they toured extensively in the United States. So here's the sort of second phrase. And, all right, so the question is, what are some ways, again, back to what Emily had talked about. Okay. So this is not my transcription. This is a transcription from Petar Londev. And so here's someone who is a practitioner and say, okay, this is how I've notated Western notation. So my question to you, before we try singing this, what are things that you feel like we should do if we're using this as a singing example with our students? Saying, okay, this could be a sight singing example, or a prepared singing example, or something we sing together in class. What are the things that you notice about, again, just this notated bit of the kind of second strain of this song? What are things that you feel are important to do, or maybe less important, or maybe you work up to? What are some things that you think you'd want to do if you were trying to sing this with your students? I'll leave you to think about that.
In a rhythm lesson in particular, or just in general?
Just in general, like if you were like, okay, here's an example, because maybe you're teaching a 20th century topics class, and you've looked at, again, Bernstein and all of these materials, and like, oh, here's something else, here's something that's not classical.
I would say the first thing that jumps out to me is the grace notes. Are we going to do those or not?
Okay, are we? I don't know, this is my question to you. Is that something you want to, do you think that's really important to doing this? Like, are these central or are these ornamental? Yeah.
I think it depends also on what system you're using. Like, are we using solfege? Are we using scale degrees? Are we singing la la la? I feel like if you're singing on a neutral syllable, then adding those ornaments makes sense. But then on solfege, it's like, are they saying the solfege quickly? Are they, like, you know, is it applicable to use solfege in here? Is, you know, like.
All right. So those definite questions here. So, because in some ways it's like, hey, this does feel diatonic. It does feel fairly equal temporary group. Like, I don't have the same kind of experience thing as compared to the Lena's examples earlier of like, oh, these are definitely not equal temper, and hearing some sound to me like much more neutral thirds. This feels very feels like, yeah, this fits on the piano, so you could hypothetically use solfege for it. So then what does that bring up? Okay.
What about the tempo marking? That's interesting.
Yeah. So this is, again, DAWs in particular are not very good at dealing with asymmetrical meters. So a lot of cases, these are, it's, again, I think it's saying that it's like 60 beats or 60 BPM to the bar. So it's like,
Oh.
and then to get that equivalent, it would be 105 for the quarter note. But like da 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 da. So again, computers, again, they don't like this kind of thing. So again, also shows how these tools, again, can define how we make sense of materials. All right.
We do have transliterated text. I mean,
Yeah.
we could use the syllables of the actual text.
Yeah. Ta ka pa ta ka. Okay, transliteration, that could help. So yeah, sorry.
I mean, I think if we're trying to attack this in an oral skills classroom, I would start with the rhythm before
All right.
I deal with pitch. I
Yeah.
mean, especially if we just practice kind of dancing it.
Mhm.
You know, start by thinking about which one of the patterns we heard,
Yeah.
and then trying to get them to dance it, and then work through the rhythm first. Then deal with the pitch. Then
Yeah.
maybe the ornamentation after that. And
All right.
try to break it down into pieces.
Okay. So it's a similar kind of thing here where, again, I'm not a culture bearer of this material. Again, I can maybe talk a little bit later about how I did get into this music. But that same kind of thing, it's like, okay, we can at least approach it from, again, this pedagogical standpoint of, again, how we can fit this into the skill, there's sort of our traditional aural skills. So like, yes, we want to be good at reading rhythms on a staff and making sense of it. We want to be good at recognizing pitch and using solfege. And then, again, I think both the ornament and the timbre too, like how much do we need to be like, we want to be able to practice or embody that very bright nasal element that is such a key part of this performance practice. So we have these different levels, and I think a lot of it is being honest with ourselves about, hey, are we trying to get our students to literally perform this music, or are we using it as, again, a means of helping them make sense of, here's something new, and what's our process of engaging with something new? What are the details? What feels important? So, again, for me, it might be a combination where, yeah, I think in the end, I am gonna, if I'm teaching this in a more traditional aural skills class, I would take out the ornaments in terms of as we learn it, but then also come clean and being like, okay, we've learned, let's say we eventually as a class, and we can do a little bit of this now, learning the solfege and the, again, the main pitches, and being able to do that as a group. And then we can continue our discussion afterwards saying, hey, what did we leave out? What are some of the things that if you wanted to really get into this, what would be the next steps? So the same thing here in terms of modeling, yeah, I did this idea of how to model what you would do next, because we all have finite time. And so much of these issues that we're talking about here is the question of finite time. And how do you deal with that? It's like, oh, we don't have enough time, so we're not even going to kind of push this question down the road, or kick the can down the road, as opposed to, okay, if we have finite amount of time, can we at least model how we should spend more time? Outside. All right, so let's give this a little bit of a try. So again, a lot of what we're seeing is very much this Ursinus pattern. So a lot of stuff that we've danced and before. So let's we'll each learn every line. Again, just 2 phrases, and again a lot of stepwise motion, which is helpful. But let's try singing. We'll start with the top line. Any octave is fine. You want it all the way down here. Again, I'm generally pretty comfortable with, again, even the less inspired students really dropping an octave. Again, I'm not perfect. It's not perfectly the enemy of the good. So any octave is fine. I'll be up here. Yeah, let's try solfege. So sol. All right, I'm going to count us off in the Ursinus with the short, short, long. Short, short, long. And I'll give us, here we go. 1, ready, and sol, 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 fa, 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 me, 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 fa, fa, me, 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 re, 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 do, re, 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 do, 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 do. All right, pretty good. So we can see our contour, nice, just each measure stepping down. Sometimes we anticipate that pitch change a little bit. But again, once we have the rhythm, we've got a lot of this now. Let's try it again. And short, ready, go. Sol, 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 fa, 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 me, 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 fa, fa, me, 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 re, 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 do, re, 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 do, 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 do. Repeat. Sol, 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 fa, 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 me, 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 fa, fa, me, 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 re, 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 do, re, 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 do, 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 do. All right, let's try the second line. So this one is more the counting, or when to switch off of the palm notes. That's the bigger challenge. So we start on the May. Same thing, I'll do the short, short, long count off. 1, ready, go. May, 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 do. 3, do, 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 do. Lay, take, do, do, do. Again. May, 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 do. 3, do, 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 do. Lay, take, do, 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 do. So you can tell I am not like Trevor. I do do bass minor. All right, so now let's do the bottom line. Do, 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 fa. So that descending fifth coming down from do, everyone's always challenging. Here we go. Same thing. 1, starting on do. Do, 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 do. Fa, sol, lay, te, do. Fa, sol, lay, do, do. Again. Do, 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 do. Fa, sol, lay, te, do. Fa, sol, lay, do, do, do. All right, let's see if we can do this together. All right, let's do these 2 rows at top line. From here, U4 in the middle, and then U4 are the bottom. All right, so let's do this actually additively. So we'll just do the top line, and you'll keep repeating, and then we'll have the second line. So, so we can hear as we go. So yeah, we'll build it downward. Sol, starting over here. 1, ready, and sol, 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 fa, 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 me, 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 me. again, some way where we're translating, we're getting, again, an emulation, approximation, but a way that helps build some of these traditional skills that we want to do. And then our next step would be like, oh, what's really important? Maybe one thing we can do is sol, 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 fa, 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 fa. And again, adding a little bit of those quick turns without changing syllables, or even just going on neutral syllables. And again, go back and sing along. See, now that we know at least where we're going, these structural pitch areas, we can, again, pay more attention to these timbral and ornamental details. So, different degrees of delving in. But again, as you could probably even tell as we were singing, the way I was conducting was very dance heavy and really feeling that lift. And that's what made, again, for me, it feels more pleasurable. All right, so let's take a brief pause. Questions? How does this feel so far? What feels practical? What are things that you like, you don't like? What are some things that you want to tease out a little more about this sort of embodied navigation approach to, again, some folkloric musics? Yeah.
I feel like having taught this kind of like asymmetrical meters before, I always think of it as short, long helps students, but I think the idea of lift really is something I didn't think about before. But even like visually, and even when I'm like conducting it, I feel like I lift myself on that long beat. So it's nice to kind of get that like a way of explaining it that's also embodied and not just about length or duration.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Rhythm is gravity. Rhythm isn't just time. So it's up and down, which I think is like another dimension. Just yeah.
I'm really excited about bringing it into piano lessons, like for working on microcosmos or something like that.
Yeah.
So that they're not counting, so they can sound musical. And
Right.
piano too, it's hard to get students to start thinking about up and down motions with their wrists and everything. So it seems really, really applicable.
Yeah, because again, and I think also part of this too, being a percussionist, where like there is so much choreographic element that just comes into how you learn the stuff and how you play. And so I'm like, when I moved into how I'm off the instruments, like, oh, this feels kind of natural because especially if I'm doing like a multi-percussion setup, it's like, oh, the way I move across is practical, but also, can I make the practical musical in that way? And I think that's why, like, in terms of like contemporary music ensembles, percussion ensembles are always like the fan favorites, because it's like, even if you don't get what's happening sonically, it's like, oh wow, see these people move in these interesting ways. And it helps imbue music with this ulterior or alternative narrative. Yeah, Mark?
Yeah, something that kind of blew my mind was you don't have to subdivide all the time, because when playing Blue Robin, for example, on the guitar, I always pluck every single note, da 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 da. It's like equal weight on every single eighth note. But now I'm thinking like I can slur that, you know, da 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 da, and it'll make it sound a lot lighter.
Right. And it's interesting thinking about that in particular, and again, that'd be a whole other discussion of like Brubeck going on these State Department tours, and that's how he's engaging with his music. And I think Paul Desmond actually phrases pretty well with that slurring, but then it's also notable that when they actually improvise, they go into a nice medium slow blues in that way. So yeah, anything else? Questions, thoughts? What's practical? What feels? Yeah, right.
Just in terms of like doing this with far too cool 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
Have you had sticks in the mud? Have you had to sort of use your charm, especially when it's 8 p.m.? Like,
right. So this was part of the asymmetrical meters lesson for the Aural's one of our unit. So I taught that the first semester. I had 4 different sections of that. So I got to see 4 very different groups of people interact. And generally, like, there is a little bit of the kind of, some of the more simple in the back kind of, it's like, but generally that's like, I don't, like, I've got to the point where it's like, okay, that's okay. I'm again, modeling is more important. And again, if a few people get into it, and eventually, even if they don't do this bit, it still kind of pushes people out, I think, of their shells enough that maybe when they come to a different kind of music that actually engages them more. So again, not everyone's going to like all these subject matters, but just because I put myself out there in this kind of slightly cringy, extroverted way, despite not being that normally. Let's say when we get like to, again, a style of music or a lesson that they click with, I think those students actually will be more engaged on that second one because it's, oh, this has been okay. I don't really like this thing, but eventually something will come around. And again, I see this also a lot with our, like the upper level classes I've taught that are more seminar style. And like certain classes, depending on like who like the different the concentrations are within the class, certain readings, certain analytical methods are much more like people, like different like music tech people and the contemporary voice people will get excited about different lessons, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But at least for me, I'm trying to be equally or always enthusiastic, and then hopefully that will help out a bit down the line. Yeah.
This is something you're getting very close to. A lot of us are really engaged that don't look like it. Right. So the people who seem like stick in the muds,
Yeah.
sometimes we're just shy, or
Yeah.
we're anxious, or we feel things more internally and less bodily.
Yes.
I've been surprised at how often a student that I'm like, this guy's mad at me, and he doesn't want to move, he's not engaging, and then like next week I'm like, oh no, it's just quiet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, completely. And this is the same thing too. We're talking again. The emulation is part of this too. It's like we're trying to that same kind of thing. There's I think we're modeling some kind of I'm modeling a particularly enthusiastic way of dealing with this material, but it's also a way that's like if I'm putting myself out there, then other like lots of means are acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And so the same way, it's like okay, maybe you want to do the dance literally, but again, I think the my sort of drumming way, I think that's like totally cool. And again, trying to encourage people to again find that method, find that way in. But yeah, but I think like this going back to our initial discussion, like emotion we don't really talk about emotion in the classroom. We talk about okay, what material are we teaching, how are we doing it, technique, but like that's the big thing for me is how do I feel emotionally grounded and feel good, and how can I try to make my students feel good, even again, especially in theory, which is not always everyone's favorite class. So yeah,
I'll say even with like a little bit of self-reflection, I feel like this is helping. Every time I try to explain Turkish makam to people, it's like the weirdest thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
And people are very intimidated by it because it's very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten like better at it over time, but I feel like the way you just did this was so clever, and you didn't focus on the fact that we're doing Bulgarian folk dances. You focused on like us moving our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really engaging and inclusive, and felt good. I still feel good. I'm happy that we did this, and I'm not thinking about the Bulgarian folk music context at all. I'm just like I feel how I feel about it, and that's giving me that connection as well, which is deeper, I think, than the intellectual connection.
Right. It's like this agency. It's like again, it is centering like a lot of this is like how do we? Something I think about a lot as a musician. Like how do I, as a musician, move through the world? How like if I were to meet someone who plays a certain way, and again, like especially from my jazz background, like how do I collaborate with different personalities, even if we might have a shared technical background or we have a shared repertoire? Personality becomes such a big thing, and how does one negotiate that? And this idea of we're all people with emotions, and I think that idea is that you don't have to love this thing, but again, you want to be aware of how do you feel about it. And again, this idea of repetition and getting into it, all of these different sort of positive ways that, again, doing it in a group, doing it with someone, if someone you think is cool or someone you think is interesting in doing that thing, that's going to pull you toward it.
Yeah.
So again, before we move on to, again, thinking about how I got into this kind of music, it is a little bit like, here's someone cool that I like is really into this. And so again, really, beginning of college, I get really into sort of downtown New York jazz, very avant world. And there's this drummer I like named Jim Black. And he plays, one of the bands that he played in was called Pechora. And I only looked at one record, but it was, a lot of it was, and there was a whole slew of bands in sort of downtown New York in the 80s and 90s I got really into. And I think partly because of how the Bulgarian radio choir blew up. Like, oh man, this music is so cool. Can we look at it from a jazz perspective? So Batora with Jim Black also played in a trio with the trumpet player Dave Douglas that was dealing with some of these Balkan folk musics. And so I get really into that. Oh, this is super cool. And then this Tigran Hamasyan, who I mentioned earlier. And I'm like, oh my God, it's super proggy and really interesting on that way. And I'm trying to play it, and I'm like, this is really hard. And then at the same time, I learned string art from a fiddle player composer who I studied with, Dan Truman. And that idea of the non-isochronous beats and not subdividing actually freed me up while playing this stuff to feel it in a different way and not be so, like if I flip the beat around counting, I'd be done. And like but it's like, oh, if I can still feel the downbeat, a lot of stuff can happen in that downbeat. That downbeat doesn't need to be totally even. It's like, again, the waiver of that space of time can be divided in different ways. And so thinking of going kind of back to the source and engaging it that way, again, it was more like, oh, here's this cool person who's drumming I like, who's into this other kind of music, and so I want to explore that, sort of following that path, I guess. All right, so again, so we've danced some stuff. We were thinking about our relationship to rhythm in these different ways. And so now a different even connection. So this is especially for those of you who might work with a lot of musical theater students, as we do here at NYU, thinking about how this idea of tension or energy and release, tension, release, can relate to questions of dramatic tension. So, all right, thinking about clave, and it's a rhythm in and of itself, but in a lot of ways it's much more about how it's a kind of keystone in all the other rhythms, how that fits with that. So actually, let's do the flip here. So I want you guys to clap this 2/3 stone clave, and then I'll play Montuno piano for it. But the idea here with this Montuno is, again, for something to be aligned with this tension resolution side, it doesn't always need to be in unison, which a lot of times we can see the coordination here, dun, dun. But again, this is consonant with this beat. And as we see on this sort of tension side of the clave, we have Montuno. The Montuno starts playing every beat on the offbeat. Da, da, da. So even if it's not perfectly aligned, we still have this resolution side, this tension side, and the various interactions of these different layers in these Afro-Latin musics, in this case focusing on the Afro-Cuban side, again, can have some expressive implications in this case. So what happens when a composer is using this tension resolution in an explicitly dramatic way? So I'm going to listen to the very, very beginning of the musical The Heights. And if you go onto the back of your paper, this is something that I even do in class. And this is, I think, also a way to do some transcription of a relatively complex idea, but in a little more of an accessible way. Because usually we'd be like, yes, transcribe the rhythm that Lin-Manuel Miranda is rapping. But instead, you guys are going to transcribe the location of the claves. And that means that you can put the locations above the words, you can underline the words when it lines up. But there's also a nice excuse for me to talk a little bit about how I do transcription anyway. And I have a very sort of DAW-centric approach to this, as opposed to doing, you only have a certain number of listens. Use technology at our disposal to do good things. All right, so this is actually some time where some context, this is a helpful thing. If you have Logic, this is a super, super helpful tool that it does. we go up here to this tempo function. We change it from keep to adapt. And now what I'm going to pull in the audio file of this opening. Voila. And yay, algorithms. And again, this isn't perfect, but generally, especially for stuff that isn't regular meter, it will automatically track the tempo, which is super, super helpful. So it's nice because that makes it very easy to loop bits.
Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. Pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I wipe down the awning. Hey y'all, good morning. Lights up on Washington.
So here we go. So this is our unit.
Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. Pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I wipe down the awning. Hey y'all, good morning. Lights up on Washington.
But the other nice thing you can do to help your students as you go through this, a lot of classic strategies. We go over here to this region, take flex and follow on. And now I can take our nice tempo and slow it down a bit.
Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. I wake up
And the best thing, shorten the units. So I'll do some looping here as a kind of like, just do a little bit of demonstration of how a lot of times when I do dictation in class, how I would do it in this regard. So a lot of looping, a lot of slowing things down, a lot of small segments.
Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day.
You might already start to notice, like, why is it awkward in the beginning?
Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. Lights. Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day.
And a lot of times I like to do after looping it for a
Lights
while.
up on Washington Heights, up at
Talking
the
with
break of
people
day.
sitting around them as they work, and I say, hey, where are you feeling this? And they're
Lights
talking
up
about
on Washington Heights, up at the break of day.
and relating the sound to lights up. Maybe we can slow it down even a little bit more.
Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day.
And start to kind of figuring out okay, which syllables.
Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day. Lights up on Washington Heights, up at the break of day.
Alright, so again, the first bar is usually the hardest. And then a lot of times I'll stop and say, hey, what have we gotten so far? So, what have you guys found so far on this first line? What syllables are these clave hits lining up with?
Between lights and up.
Between lights and up. So yeah, that's one thing that lights comes in a little bit early, so it anticipates that beginning. So that's interesting. Okay. So it starts up here. Lights clink up. So where's on this 3 side? Where else are on and ton? Lights up on Washington. So on and ton kind of weaker syllables. What's up on Washington Heights? And then where are on the 2 side?
At and a break.
At break. All right. So at break seems to be, that's important. That seems to be at, like, he's telling some very important information here. What time it is. And so it being on the resolution side of the clave, it's like, great, we can really hear that. Break. All right, let's try. So we have this anticipation. That's an interesting observation. And again, what I also like about doing this A doing 4 bars of clave hits is, again, less dense information for someone to get down, but it still reveals some interesting things about the construction of the work that can lead to discussion. All right, so we have that. Let's try the next phrase. We'll do what we've already transcribed, and the next part.
What's up on Washington Heights? Up at the break of day, I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. What's up on Washington Heights? Up at the break of day, I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. What's up on Washington Heights? Up at the break of day, I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. What's up on Washington Heights? Up at the break of day, I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. What's up on Washington Heights? Up at the break of day, I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away.
And again, a lot of things I like to do with these handouts, too, when we're dealing with lyrics, is again, you can do kind of annotations, and then when I really start to really feel where this clave is going, it's like, yeah. And I'm tracking, like, I'll wake up, and gotcha. And then I start to get into the rhythm of it. Again, I really like, gel pens for this kind of thing, because it's like, you can really, again, your embodied motion of writing can leave lots of marks very quickly. So I encourage gel pens in that way. They're very colorful. So I wake up, and so I have my kind of light taps versus my more accented ones. So I can kind of tapping along and leaving a trace of my embodied experience of this rhythm, and then start to translate that into actual notation. Let's keep going here, and let's try the next phrase.
Pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing.
We'll keep back up a little bit so we don't get too excited about the really laid back phrasing.
Pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing.
All right, we'll do the last bit now.
Pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I write down the awning. Hey y'all, good morning. Pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while I write down the awning. Hey y'all, good morning. Pop the grave at the crack of dawn, sing while.
All right, we've heard you enough, Lynn. For the sake of time here, and I know this is badly notated with the long note, but this is maybe easier in Microsoft Word. So again, I underline where I'm feeling it, and then we notice, again, this kind of in between lights, and then pop coming after the hit. But it is interesting when we start to see the pattern of what's getting emphasized. Break, gotta chase, dawn, sing, we have this enjambment here, poetic enjambment, and then morning. So we start to see kind of what Manuel and the character Usnavi is doing on the 3 side. This is what he's doing on the 2 side. And they are doing different things. The way the rhythm is on the 3 side versus the way the rhythm is on the 2 side. The 2 side does seem to resolve more clearly. And then this last one is a little bit different. Wipe down the on and hey y'all, good morning. We have a little bit of tresillo, and then the tresillo keeps going over the 2, which is interesting. So anyway, this transcription exercise, again, starting to think about that tension and resolution, you can now use that idea of rhythmic tension, rhythmic lift, bump, 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 and fall, lift and release, to think about, okay, Miranda, who's, again, knows this kind of music, and has grown up with this kind of music, has an intuitive relationship with it, and he's also someone who knows musical theater history. That's like, he has these different worlds in his brain, and how is he using them together? Which I think is a very, very interesting analytical question. So we have some discussion questions that, we don't have that much time, but yeah, we have a few thoughts on each. Again, usually we'd have some more time. We'd be nice to the students. We discuss in groups. We talk this again. This would be like a whole class period. This is our very, very accelerated version, as we've seen. So, like, what note of the clave is he? Again, we seem to be avoided most often. Like, what clave note tends to not have a syllable on it?
First one.
Yeah, so that's interesting how, so we anticipate it, and then on the third phrase, we come off of it. So what does that do? Like, what is avoiding that three side, avoiding beat one of our phrase? What's interesting about it? Or like, why do you think that could be cool, interesting, expressive?
Yeah.
What are you guys talking about?
Motion at the beginning and then resolution at the end.
All right, so it helps create that sense of tension, right? It amplifies the tension by, again, subverting our sense of downbeat. So again, it's still consonant with the clave, even though it's not with it, because it still has that sense of tension. Tension side, resolution side. All right, so we have that emphasis of tension. Okay, that's a great sort of technical reason. What else could be other reasons why he wants to avoid it?
I might think of it as looseness and tightness instead of tension and release.
Yeah.
It's because I don't feel like he's subverting the downbeat at all. It's clearly there.
Yeah.
He's just not doing it, right?
Right, or that release, that loose tight. So okay, if there's that loose tight thing, what is, again, now we get to our kind of fun question here. We have a sort of loose tight thing, and we have, again, goes right along with what you're saying, this loose tight. We have the poetic cadences tend to line up with the two side. Then we have that one bit of enjambment that subverts that. Practice John sing while I wipe, and it continues through. But we're starting to see this idea here of, okay, we have the loose and the tight rhythmic relationship, and that tension resolution side of the clave. So what does it mean that Usnavi has, or at least the character has, a relationship with the clave based on this opening monologue? So what is his relation to the clave? What does it might say about him as a person? This is where things get very fun, goofy, and abstract. And it's like, yes, liberal arts school. Which I feel in a place like NYU, we have a lot of people who, like, again, we're interested in reading, but again, have a very full conservatory style schedule. So they're trying to sneak in these ways of what can music mean, I think is always fun. So if he's loose and then he's tight,
something like the character has a very natural relationship with a clave, the fact that the two intermingle in quite a relaxed, he's not being bullied by the clave or anything like that.
All right, so he's familiar. So this is like, so maybe like, so you can say the clave is the neighborhood. This is musically his home, and he's comfortable enough where he can play against it. He doesn't have to fight with it. Again, there's that comfort to be near the note rather than being on it, especially the top of the great when he starts to really lean back and you're like, yeah, okay. So again, rhythmic interpretation, you start to get a sense of who this character is. And it's not like, again, this isn't some sort of uptight, manic individual. And there's something about, again, a character's music, and this is something too that, again, as a huge Sondheim fan, I feel Sondheim, the music of his characters are really elemental. And I think there's something similar going on here with this character who, again, portrayed by Miranda in the original production, can really be seen as a stand-in in some ways. But yeah, this is yeah.
Sorry, I just wonder, are there a lot of other other recordings of people performing this, and are they similar in where they sit in that rhythm?
Well, let's check. Let's see Anthony Ramos from the film.
This is not set up.
Yeah, here's nope. That's.
Party fans, your network just got stronger with Voodoo Ranger Hard Charge City, made with fruit. What's up on Washington Heights? Up at the break of day, I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. Pop the grate at the crack of dawn, sing while I wipe down the awning. Hey, good morning.
All right, it's a lot more of that ending too. And I just think I can find the visual is also the way it's shot and the way he plays it, kind of how he presents the camera. And that's cool.
But the break of day,
There you go.
I got to sleep. What's up on Washington Heights? Up at the break of day, I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. Pop the break at the crack of dawn, sing while I wipe down the awning. Hey, good morning. Ice cold.
So again, we have film versus stage. But yeah, it seems to be. I don't know. I think in general, Anthony Ramos is Usnavi's a bit more of a striver, perhaps as in somebody again, less neighborhood, but seems to be a little bit more of energy. Maybe I don't always want to be here, which also plays into the framing device of him talking to his relatives in the Dominican Republic. So yeah, there's some different, and again, this is especially if we're teaching actors in our classes, which in many cases here at NYU we are. This idea of being able to use theory and observe and these kinds of observations, that's like, they do so much character study in terms of text, but can we add that little bit of, oh, you can do character study in terms of sound, rhythm, contour as well, and that might be what helps unlock a song or a character for you in that way. So just a couple of minutes left. Let me get back to, again, we're basically to the end here, so just in these last few minutes. Final questions. Are there questions about evaluation? Like again, these are fun activities. I think I always enjoy when I get to teach in this way, but then we come to some of the practical brass tacks of like, okay, so what do we do with this? What's the point? But what are some of the maybe questions that you have about whether you want to use some of this material or what this means for some of the stuff we've talked about in terms of modeling and using material that we might not be totally a part of. What's the good, the bad, the ugly? Yes, sir.
I'll toss something out. I'm curious, if are you familiar with Delacroix's method? If it's kind of any, because Delacroix is experiencing music through your body, right? And Diane Urista's got that lovely oral skills textbook, but she doesn't, come at vocal music through that. And I was thinking, boy, this is such a lovely way to kind of apply that idea to getting a music that's unfamiliar to you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've never formally studied it. The closest I can say is when I was like 3 and 4, I did kind of classes kind of in that vein. Yeah. And again, this being the 90s where it's like this multiculturalism being such an important thing, like there was a lot of that kind of energy. So it's not something I thought consciously about, but I think definitely is something that, again, felt intuitive because it was taught to me at this very young age before I really realized what was going on with it. But yeah, I think the movement side is, again, very grounded in my percussion practice, and being married to a dramaturg and theater producer is really gives me a whole other thing, like, oh, I can relate this music thing to how the other sides of a theatrical work and how, oh, that can be a cool thing for someone who, because I think that it's many ways in physically, but also many ways in intellectually to the material I think we're trying to get across, and we're not sure what that can be. And again, offering these options and that, like, okay, here's something that's designed for our theater students, but again, a lot of jazz students who again are really into mixed meter stuff. It's like, oh, here's a different way of thinking about it, and I'm like, oh wow, that's super cool, because everyone loves to play standard instead, and whatnot. So yeah, it's just these. We're not sure at least I'm not sure what's going to click, and I think that idea of modeling a curiosity, modeling, looking at something from different angles, both intellectually but also physically, are ways that, again, so I hope that outside the class they'll run into something new and they'll have some kind of way of processing that and be able to have some awareness of that. So it's not that, oh, this is new, I don't like it, I recoil. Oh, this is new, I don't think I like it, but how could I get at this?
Yeah.
So, if I liked it, what would it feel like? So.
You're really inviting us just to kind of to play with it.
Yeah.
And it's less intimidating, right? Rather than asking them to transcribe out the rhythm very carefully with the copy pattern, right? We got some lyrics, we're just going to underline, we're just going to try to experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
it's
a
lovely
big,
way to come at it.
and that's a big thing for me in transcription in general. In the other classes I teach here is I designed an upper level, the advanced pop dictation class. And there's a lot of, again, using, it's less about the pure accuracy, because for them you're dealing with rhythmic nuance and pitch nuance and groove nuance. Like, that's not always going to come out. Like, it's really hard to get that super detailed, but then it's the process of trying to get there might allow you to hear more of it. So it's more of transcription as a means to an end, rather than transcription being the end in and of itself, in that regard. So, yeah, any other thoughts, questions? I know, again, it's what a weekend, and so again, I give you all the credit for sticking around and listening and dancing and doing some dictation homework. But again, I've had such a wonderful time this weekend, and yeah, until I don't know, I feel weird having to like finish off the whole weekend.
I know, right?
I'm like, what am I saying? Like, go forth. It is Sunday. All right, well, yeah. I mean, I'm not rushing out. I would love to keep chatting with everyone. So, safe travels for those who are going further afield, and yeah, hope to run into not too distant future. So.